Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota. Senator, what do you make of this?
High drama in Alaska, Neil. It's been, as you know, the last several months, quite a thing to watch. But we're glad we're going to have another Republican senator hopefully here soon. That'll give us 47 in the United States Senate, and that puts us in a position to exercise a lot more leverage over what happens here than we had prior to the election.
Are you sure she'll be in your fold? Technically, Senators, you know, she won as an independent. She might be bitter about the way the Republican Party treated her. I don't know how these things go. And she might not be such a predictable Republican vote.
She is, I think, indicated pretty clearly that she's going to caucus with the Republicans. Lisa is a Republican, and she attended our policy luncheon today. So my expectation is that she will be a part of our Republican caucus. And as I said, that gives us 47 Republicans, which we believe is going to give us a lot more influence over what happens in the United States Senate.
Without beating this dead horse, Senator, I only raised the point because former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, who backed Joe Miller, had said she wondered as to whether Lisa Murkowski would vote in the end with Republicans. You have no doubt that she will.
I don't, Neil. And of course, we will welcome her back when the time comes here, and I think we'll have probably an opportunity to visit with her at greater length. We haven't seen a lot of her since this whole thing got started.
True.
But I know from experience that having served with her that on a lot of the fiscal issues, and those are the issues that most Americans and probably most Alaskans care the most about right now, she's in the right place. And I expect that she will continue to be in the right place and help us change the direction of this country away from this massive expansion of government and tax increases and job-killing policies that are coming out of Washington, D.C.
Speaking of what's coming out of Washington, D.C., Republicans are setting up their own plan to deal with these deficits and to deal with all this spending. You've been one of the leading proponents of addressing these concerns. In fact, it's gotten you mentioned as a prospective presidential candidate, but who are we to soil this discussion with that stuff? But I'm curious as to whether you feel if we don't do something soon, we could look like a lot of these European countries, like Ireland right now, and Greece and Portugal, all of them on the brink of collapse.
We're on a slippery slope, and if we don't get this thing turned around, we just have a few years in order to do that. And if you look at where we are in terms of debt to GDP and the size of government to GDP, all the metrics by which you measure whether or not you are moving in the direction of a Western European socialized democracy, we're getting closer and closer to that all the time. We have got to get the country turned around. It starts with attacking the spending problem here in Washington. We don't have a revenue problem here. We have a spending problem. And we need to start that right now. I'm going to offer a resolution here in a little while at our Republican conference meeting that would take us back to the 2008 level for discretionary spending. And that saves about $450 billion over the next 10 years. But we've got to take on the mandatory part of our budget, which is the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and start reforming those programs, or we are headed down a path to a train wreck here. It's that simple.
You know, I mentioned before the presidential contest of 2012, and I was not too surprised, because I've told you this before in prior visits here, Senator. You actually polled pretty well, and you're considered among even though you're pretty fair-skinned, blonde hair and all that, but one of the dark horses who could emerge as sort of like an alternative candidate to some of the names, the popular names bandied about there. And you have a pretty ample war chest. I mean, better than $7 million already should you choose to run, are you?
We're taking a look at it. We've got a lot of good candidates out there. The one thing I know is that we need to get a candidate out there who can take on this president and hopefully defeat him and his agenda and get us back on a path.
What would be your cause? What would be your differentiator?
Well, I think, for one, I'm someone who believes that the role of the federal government ought to be limited. What we've seen in the last 2 years under this administration is the most massive expansion of government since the 1960s. I believe in free enterprise and economic freedom, and that the way that you create jobs is to expand the economy, not expand the government. You've got very different philosophical views about how you deal with the issue of job creation and economic growth, about how you deal with the issue of spending and debt, about how you deal with the issue of keeping this country safe and strong going into the future. So there's going to be plenty of contrast between whomever our candidate is and the president, but we need somebody that can be in the arena and make those arguments and give the American people a clear choice.
But it's fairly clear that if you were to announce a president, you'd much sooner do it here than, let's say, on Bill O'Reilly.
Of course. Always, Neil. You know, your first choice.
There you go. All right, I'll just pass it along to O'Reilly. Senator,
okay.
seriously, very good having you. Thank you for stopping by.
It's great to be with you. Thanks, Neil.
Senator.